Guys, if we are not in a recession, I will be absolutely surprised, and here's why. When you look at recessions, 70% of our GDP is driven by consumers. Look at this article that just came out about credit card delinquencies. We are at credit card delinquency rates that are higher than are on par with the great financial crisis of 2007 to 2010. If you look at these two charts right here, this is from the St. Louis Fed. This is percentage of people delinquent on credit card debt, 2003 to 2023. This is by age, blue being the younger. Look at where we're at here. A little over 3% here for all zip codes, and for the most financially distressed zip codes, a little over 4%. This is very important stuff. You look at credit card balances have been skyrocketing. Why? Inflation is causing things to go up. People aren't saving. We look at savings rates. Those are down. But it gets worse than this. If you know, subprime loans are the ones that are given to people with under 600 credit scores on auto loans. This goes back to 2003 and 2004. This is the percentage of borrowers 60 days past due on their auto loans. Highest level since 1996. Guys, I'm not a fudster. I very much believe in the long term of this U.S. economy. We've had a Great Depression and the U.S. economy got better because of it. We had a great financial crisis. We've had booms. We've had busts. It does not matter. The U.S. economy gets better. But right now, the biggest one just happened this morning. The Empire State Manufacturing Index surged to negative territory, and look where it's at. Over negative 40%. Negative 40 right here. Guess what? They were expecting negative 4. Look at where this is, guys. This was COVID. We're lower than the great financial crisis. We are lower than the tech bust. This is concerning. If you told me, Paul, here are 3 random data points. When did this happen in history? During a good economy or a bad one? And you said credit card delinquencies are up, auto loan delinquencies are up, and the New York Manufacturing Index had skyrocketed in terms of negative territory, I would have said, yeah, things aren't good. Couple that with the yield curve inversion. For those who don't know what that is, when the 2-year, some people look at 90 days, some they look at 2-year treasuries, are higher rate than the 10-year, it means people are more concerned about the short run than the long run. And the last some X number of times, it's led to recession within 18 months. The difference is it's been pretty much 18 months and we haven't called a recession yet. July 6th of 2022 when that first happened and the yield curve inverted. About 10 months ago, banks started to have problems. The reason being, the treasuries that they had on their books had absolutely plummeted in value, and the government had to backstop them. They're currently sitting on $650 billion in unrealized losses. The only reason it didn't cause a bigger fuss was that the government backed it all up. Now you couple all this with this article. U.S. has depleted all the excess savings they accumulated during the pandemic. During the pandemic, people did a lot less. The government was issuing checks out. They were able to save a lot of money, which was great. But since then, and since student loans have now gone back into needing to be paid, this is causing a strain on people's finances. That's why the credit card balances are so high. Couple that also with higher interest rates, higher costs for cars. Do you see my point here? Again, I'm not being a futster by saying the world's falling apart. The world's not falling apart. But I also don't want us to be delusional to think there aren't major issues in the economy that are starting to surface. Yes, we don't see it in stock prices. I get that. And stock prices are always high, right, with eternal optimism going there. But I look at this saying, man, all of these things are happening. The consumer is 70% of the U.S. economy, and the consumer has increasing debt loads and less cash flow. How does that work? When you look at the consumer increasing their credit card balances by 1.5% to 2% increase every quarter, that's 6 to 8% per year. That's not what GDP and incomes are growing at. When you look at that and say consumer credit card balances are going higher, delinquencies are jumping, I look at that saying, wait a second, how does that mean good things? I don't know. And again, I'm not trying to be a futster, but at the end of the day, seeing all this money going away, all the money they're able to accumulate, what are people left with? If you sat there and you had a $100,000 credit card, you got a brand new one, and every single month you paid your mortgage with that credit card, but you didn't have the money to pay off that credit card, just make the minimum payments. At some point, you're going to max out that credit card and not be able to afford your mortgage anymore. And that's what we're doing here. I just feel like we're just relying on this credit, this constant credit crunch. Now, does that mean we're going to have another Great Depression or Great Recession? No, that's not what I'm saying. But for those out there who think the economy is rosy, I think the unemployment rate is so low because of a lack of people going out there and working, because we had checks written everybody to stay home. It has become harder to find better employees. But even those levels of a year ago and 18 months ago aren't at the same levels they're at today. Now, what does this have to do with the stock market? Well, guys, if we hit a recession, Fed's going to cut rates. People think they want Fed to cut the rates, but guys, we don't want the Fed to cut rates. The reason being is that means the economy is not going well. And if the economy isn't going well, it means companies' revenues are declining and definitely their profits declining. Does that mean you should run for the hills? No. Remember, we still teach dollar cost averaging, because if all of a sudden the government wrote another $3 trillion check and put it in everybody's pocket and said, find some more time to kick the can down the road, of course stocks will go higher. Eventually, there'll be a come to Jesus moment in the stock market. But we're here to provide that comfort of saying, guys, when things look the worst, it's probably not as bad as it is. Just like when things feel the best. We look at the stock market, and in the last 2 years, it's gone like this. It feels pretty good again, doesn't it? And we've been sitting there saying, yeah, we don't think it's as good as people think it is because of valuations. And of course, we've been criticized, and I'm okay with that. But there's a difference between blind optimism and pessimism. I consider myself an optimist. I understand there are issues, but I think in the long run, we will be better because of it. That is the definition I like to attach myself to as an optimist. If that's the way you want to be, follow our channel, because we're going to sit here and when things look the worst, we're going to say, guys, remember, you want lower prices on stocks. If the economy has a recession, people will lose jobs. But if you look at every recession in history, we come out better, stronger every single time. Are there issues? There will always be issues. Are there bright spots? There will always be bright spots. But at the end of the day, the consumer makes up 70% of our economy. So I look at the consumer, and when there are problems with the consumer, I get a little worried. When I see these problems, when I see that manufacturing index that came out with a negative 40-some reading versus negative 4 expected, and a lot of decline in the amount of ordering, that's a problem. When people are decreasing, when companies are decreasing how much they're ordering, it means they don't see demand or they see decreased demand. The consumer drives a lot of this. And you might sit there and say the consumer is strong. That's fine. But a friend of mine owns a dealership in St. Louis. And I asked him, hey, I have a 780 credit score. What's my rate if I want to buy a car? He goes 11% for a brand new car. I was like, are you kidding me? He said, no, it's crazy. He's like, I might be able to pull a favor here or there and get 9.5 or 10. But we're talking about double digit for a brand new car for a 780 credit score. Now, guys, this is the consumer sentiment by the University of Michigan. Congratulations to the University of Michigan on winning the national championship. Go blue. That's right. Nick's giving me a high five over here. Guys, going back 50 years, this was COVID. This is where we were at the end of 2022. Now, it's kind of funny to me that I look at this going, wait, stock market was down, people felt crappy, stock market went back up, people felt better. But this is where consumer sentiment is, okay? Look at the recession, the Great Recession. Back at the end of 2022, consumer sentiment was below the pits of the Great Recession. Does this seem like what should be going on during a booming great economy? I don't know. And it could be different this time. It could be different where the government just says, listen, we're going to try to avoid every recession in the world by writing a check. Maybe so. And if interest rates go down, people are going to feel warm and fuzzy inside. But at the end of the day, I had to ask the question, why would interest rates go down? They would only send interest rates down because they're worried about a recession or the recession's already in play. This whole idea of looking for interest rates to go down as because of inflation only, guys, the Fed wants to keep inflation lower. If the economy is booming, that's an inflationary metric. If the economy is booming and inflation starts to pick up again or even stay at that 3.5% to 4% where core inflation is, when they want to get it to 2%, what are they going to do? They're not going to cut rates. Everybody's banking for 6 or 7 rate cuts this year. Remember, stocks fall because things that aren't supposed to happen. The idea of banking on 6 or 7 interest rate cuts seems a little optimistic. Could it happen? Absolutely. It absolutely could happen. Anything can happen. The last 3 months are unbelievable what's happened in the stock market. You have companies just skyrocketing in price. Why? Because AI is changing the world. Okay, great. You know what you're hearing now about Tesla? Just remember this. Go look back at Tesla. And we were sitting there saying, guys, Companies aren't amazing forever. The amount of criticism that Elon Musk is now getting, even today, Elon Musk is getting the criticism that he isn't dedicated enough to Tesla. He's too distracted by other things. This is the guy that could do no wrong 3 years ago. You know why? Because the stock kept going up and up and up. And eventually the stock stops going up and up and up. And then all of a sudden people hate the company. The stock hit a peak of 414, went to 101, and now it's back up to 215. That's why I want you to watch our channel. We're here to explain all these different things and how they work in the economy. We truly believe it's a few metrics that matter. To me, I follow the consumer. I look at that consumer and think to myself, if the consumer has a lot of money, if the consumer is doing well, and unemployment is low, and there's still a lot of demand for jobs. But even in our office upstairs, the number of applicants we've received for new openings has greatly increased from a year and a half. That is a huge, huge thing to me where I go, okay, maybe things are getting a little bit tight, a little bit more loose in the labor market. Maybe it's becoming a little bit harder for the consumer. Auto loans bother me. Credit card delinquencies bother me. I look at the office buildings. Office buildings, 44% of office buildings are underwater in this country. That means they're worth less than the mortgage balances. If you don't think that's going to affect banks, I have no idea what to tell you. Unless all of a sudden occupancy increases. Let me ask you a question. If we hit a recession, do you think occupancy rates are going to increase? That's all I have to ask there. Now, again, I'm not telling you sell everything, go build a safe bunker in your house. No, what I'm saying is be ready for volatility. Stick with your plan. People do the worst when they deviate from their plan. I've done the worst in my life when I deviated from my plan. That's it. If you stick to your plan through thick and thin, you probably do well. What is that plan? Dollar cost average and a low cost ETFs. And if you choose to buy individual stocks, buy based on a process, one in which we teach here. It can look bad from time to time. Of course it will be. There'll be times it looks amazing. There'll be times it looks poor, but the right process works over the long haul. Just be ready. If you save, if you live within your means, these things won't affect you as much. The problems we have with consumers is because people live a lifestyle they can't necessarily afford. We're burning through the money in the pandemic. So if you're new to the channel and you like what I've said here, I want to hear about what stocks I want to own regardless of what happens in the economy, watch our next video.